Real crown or real crowns. Real crowns. We're gonna do that. So welcome to Real Crowns Faith Unaltered Edition. I am just one of your handsome co-hosts you see this evening with you. My name is Tyler Fowler. With me is my brother, my Canadian friend, who is wrong about red cream soda, Mr. Dale Glover. And Dane just dropped out. My second co-host. Where did Dane go? We'll
Dane
never know. I can't.
He just conceded defeat. See that? Roman Catholic Eucharistic miracles. There's nothing.
Thank you. So we hired free of charge, Kevin non-tradiclass. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for joining us. I will let you introduce yourself in just a second. But we hired Kevin with another form of payment other than money. Thanks and gratitude is thrown at him right now to come on and prevent Dane from converting to Roman Catholicism. And so we've got a really good show lined up for you guys today. We're looking at Eucharistic miracles, and we're going to dig down deep in the depths because intuitively on my end, it seems like whenever you hear someone talk, and this is actually the conversation that Dane and I were having, when you hear someone talk about Eucharistic miracles, it's always in the context, or it seems to be, this is the intuitive part, it seems to be to me anyway, this idea of miraculous intervention that is proving the authenticity of the Roman Catholic Church. We know that Jesus was authenticated, would be the word, by miracles. And so that's kind of the big thing that showed his messiahship according to the scriptures, that's what God had promised in the Old Testament, and that's what we see Jesus do. These miracles and the resurrection from the dead, ultimately culminating in that, is the sticker of approval, or the stamp of approval, I should say. And just to me, that's kind of what it seems like whenever you hear different people, Roman Catholics, non-Roman Catholics, talk about these kind of things. Dale, let me turn it over to you real quick. Is that the same impression that you kind of get, or do you think I'm just way off base with that?
So I was trying to, because Dane was having some technical issues. It looks like he's back now, but yes. Sorry, just what was it you said, and I'll tell you what my
So whenever you hear about, people, whether they're Roman Catholic or not, talk about Eucharistic miracles, does it seem kind of intuitively like these are signs that are pointing to the validity of the Roman Catholic Church? Like that's why they have Eucharistic miracles?
Well, okay, so I'll say it's a mixed bag because I know, okay. So definitely yes, and I think that's kind of the default in the mind of people is if these things are valid, if there is something to it, then it's obviously suggesting something about the Roman Catholic Church being the true church or something like that. Mm-hmm. That said, I know a lot of people within Orthodoxy who are accepting these miracles and they think it's no problem, like, oh, that it supports Orthodoxy. So my experience is it's been kind of a mixed bag. So
really, we should talk about that later. I've never heard of that. Now, from a Eastern Orthodox perspective, like the only thing I know about Eucharistic miracles is that, and I think somebody in the chats can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a kind of an appendix, I guess one could call it, in one of the books. Now, I don't remember if it's Russian, Antiochian, OCA, whatever, but basically it says if, and this is paraphrase, if the prosper bread, or if the consecrated bread, I should say, because prosper bread is different, my bad, but if the consecrated bread looks or changes into what looks like flesh, or the wine changes into what looks like wine, set it aside, call the bishop, and start over. So that to me kind of gives a hint, at least, that there's a recognition of that possibly happening at some point. Whether it's happened or not is one thing, but obviously Roman Catholics would claim that that is the case, that there's been scientific evidence done. These are the claims, and I do want to bring Dane on to kind of let us know and let our audience know what it was really that, like, what got you investigating these claims, and did you have the same kind of mindset that I just described and that Dell kind of, agreed with, that these are intuitively, signs that, well, hey, these things are happening in the Roman Church, therefore it must be a valid, or at least have apostolic succession. What do you think, Dane?
Hey.
Oh no.
He was saying in the private chat he's having issues. So
Dane, shut your video off. Like, if you can still hear me,
I can't.
Try to shut your video off.
I can hear you.
I think he's back now. He's talking and stuff.
All right. So my internet keeps going from like 1 bar to 2 to 1 to 2, and I don't know what's wrong with it. But are y'all hearing me pretty decently now?
I can hear you now. Try shutting your camera off. That saves on bandwidth. He just froze up again.
If you can hear me,
there we go.
Like,
yep, you're good.
You're hearing me?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So yeah, to answer your question, I think that if the Catholic Church claims that transubstantiation happens, and that in the Mass, the consecrated bread and wine becomes truly the body and blood of Christ, that's an extraordinary claim, right? That is mystical, it's miraculous, it's amazing. And so an extraordinary claim like that, if it was backed up with both the validity of the claim and the religion and the church behind it. So yeah, I think that if these Eucharistic miracles are true, where the host is becoming is actually starting to secrete blood or transform into human flesh in such a way that you could take it to a laboratory and see, white blood cells and DNA fragments, I think that would absolutely, it would be a big check mark in the right direction for the Roman Catholic Church, making the claim that they're the one true church, that their doctrines are true, or I shouldn't necessarily say the one true church, but certainly part of the one true church at least, and that they have apostolic succession and sacramental authority and all that. It would be a huge gust of wind in those sails, right? And that doesn't mean that, like I said, that doesn't mean that it's the only true church. I mean, you could have miracles in the Orthodox Church or miracles in the Anglican Church, but it would certainly put them on the map of legitimate.
Right. No, I hear you. And that seems to be the claim, that whenever I have these conversations, that's kind of what I run into, this, that, and the other. And so my question for you, Dane, is what got you started? And then I want to bring Kevin on to introduce yourself and then give a kind of a negative. But what interested you in the Eucharistic miracles to begin with? I know you've been studying, like you said, in the I don't think you've said it live, but in the green room or right before we went live, we were talking, and you've been investigating Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy. And so what specifically was it about Eucharistic miracles? Like, tell me the story that led up to, I'm going to investigate Eucharistic miracles right now. Like, what happened?
Well, YouTube is a fun thing, isn't it?
It is.
I started following some traditional Catholics. There's a channel called I Miss, and I started listening to his videos, and he was doing a video on miracles that substantiate the truth claims of the Catholic Church. And within that video were these Eucharistic miracles. And I have been for a long time, I guess you could say, becoming more comfortable with a higher view of the sacraments, right? Like,
yeah,
that something more than symbolism is going on. And I've been more and more convinced of that as I've hung out with Orthodox folks, as I've read the early church fathers, as I've meditated on John 6 and just all these different things. And so my mind was already really open to the idea of real presence, in some mystical way, the flesh and blood of Christ being given to us through the bread and the wine. And so once I saw these Eucharistic miracles, I was like, man, if that's true and these are valid and they're proven, not only does it validate the Catholic Church, but it validates the literal reading of Christ instituting, "This is my body, this is my blood," and it would validate a move towards a higher view of the sacraments and a higher view of what's going on there. Um, and when I say higher view, that's that's kind of a colloquialism, right? I'm not trying to put down Baptist or something as being low. I'm just saying, like, it's a higher view to say it becomes flesh and blood than to say, hey, it's just a symbol as we remember
Well,
Jesus' sacrifice.
you got to look at it like in terms of Christology, right? Like a high Christology would be like, say, Mark has high Christology, right? Well, he's claiming Jesus is divine, right? But if Mark had a low Christology, well, we don't really see divinity within Mark, definitely human, definitely miraculous claims, but not God status. So that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And actually, that metaphor works perfectly because in the Orthodox and in the Catholic churches, and probably some high Lutheran and Anglican churches as well, the claim is that Christ is their body, blood, soul, and divinity, right? So it is a high view of the sacrament when you're saying that the very divinity of Christ is communicated to you and you consume that. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from with all that.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Dane, and thank you for being here tonight. This is going to be, like I said, before you go on vacation, and I'm going on vacation in July as well. So I thought we'd have a fun episode, and then we've got a really fun episode Friday. So this Friday at 7 p.m., we're going to be responding to good old Joe Rogan, Professor Dave, Terrence Howard. We're going to go up in the world or down. I don't know. I guess that's kind of subjective. But in terms of fame, we're going to start responding to a little bit more famous, quote unquote, people. And definitely Joe Rogan and Professor Dave is on that list. So this is going to be a fun episode before Dane and I kind of go away for the month of July. I think Dane's still going to be doing stuff, and Dane, you can clarify if I'm wrong here on anything. But I think you're still going to be doing some things with Three Crowns for July. But until you really get settled in with your move and and adapting to that, I know things are going to be tough for you to push out content. And so I've kind of let everybody know, hey, look, Three Crowns isn't going anywhere. It's just going on a little mini vacation for a little bit. But is there anything there you want to clarify before I hand it over to Kevin?
Yeah, so Three Crowns, I'm still going to try to put stuff out as much as I can, but I'm not exactly sure what my new schedule is going to look like with my new job and all these kind of things. So I'm going to try to get videos out. It just might not be as like routine and regular and consistent as it has been. Yeah. But we'll know a whole lot more, mid-July with kind of what the flow of my new day-to-day is like.
Okay. All right. You were kind of cutting out there just a little bit, but it came through. But all right. So also, Dane, what would help if you go to settings and then go to camera, and then underneath your picture, you should see camera resolution. I know your camera's not on, but I have a feeling like this has something to do with the bandwidth as well. So you might try clicking low definition and just keep your camera off, and that might help. So you're on Google Chrome, right?
Yep. I just did that.
Okay. All right. Cool. You sound good. All right, Kevin. Sorry to keep you waiting, sir. Thank you, first of all, for coming on. It's my first time meeting you. It's a pleasure. Dell has hyped you up, and so I'm excited to have you on. So no pressure, but you've got big expectations. No, I'm just playing. But no, thank you. Seriously, thank you for joining us. I'm definitely excited to hear. I'm definitely ready and excited to hear what you have to say about this. Please, for our audience, since this is your first time on, give a little bit of background about. So from my understanding, you were Roman Catholic and then left. Is that fair? Okay? All right, fair enough. Well, I'll let you tell the story. Go ahead.
Cool. So thanks for having me on, Tyler. It's great meeting you, and Dane, it's great meeting you too. Dale, thanks for making the introduction. Just a little bit about me. So for those of you who don't know a whole lot about Catholicism, there's a difference between your average run-of-the-mill Catholic and then kind of like the hardcore Catholic. And there's this movement within the Catholic Church called the Traditionalist Movement. It started in 1962 during the Second Vatican Council. The Second Vatican Council made a whole bunch of changes to the way that the church operates. Some people didn't like that, so they kind of started almost like a counter-Reformation movement.
Sedevacantist?
So no, not Sedevacantism. That comes later.
Okay. Okay.
But okay. So my grandparents were some of the people who didn't like the changes of the Second Vatican Council. And so they actually bought an abandoned Protestant church and like renovated it, turned it into a Catholic church. And they were just having priests come like independently, like not part of any diocese, to this rundown church they bought to say the traditional Latin mass. And shortly before I was born, they wound up having an organization called the FSSP. That's an acronym that stands for the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter.
Okay.
The Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter moved their priests into this church and took up permanent residence there. So I was born into the FSSP, a traditionalist Catholic movement.
Okay.
The FSSP does mass in Latin. I went to school in the basement of this church that my grandparents founded. So every school day started with mass. So I went to mass 6 days a week, Monday through Friday and Sunday. I went to confession once a week. I was confirmed, which is another Catholic sacrament, at the age of like 10 or 11. My confirmation name is John Vianney, after Saint John Vianney, the patron saint of priests, because at that time I thought I wanted to become a priest.
Oh, wow.
I never did. Obviously, you can see the wedding ring on my finger. I found out I like girls, and I was like, "Oh yeah, hey."
It's going to throw a wrench into that.
Right. Can't really be a priest anymore, but that's all right. My brother wound up going to the seminary. So there's only one FSSP seminary in the Americas. There's another one in Europe, but there's only two in the world. One is in Nebraska, and the other one's over in Europe. My brother went there before discerning out, so he's not a priest. But my cousin is still there, and I grew up a mile down the road from my cousins, so we were kind of like one big family. And so he is becoming a priest. He's actually going to be ordained next year.
Okay.
So all of that to say that my grandparents founded church, my cousin's becoming a priest, my brother at least went to the seminary. I thought I was going to become a priest. I come from a very, very Catholic family, but I have long hair and I have tattoos. So what happened? What went wrong with me? Right. So I guess I started asking questions, I guess. And the organization that I come from is pretty they don't love questions. It's very, at least they didn't. Maybe things have changed in the last 6 years, but the questions that I was asking, I realized that I lacked some of the moral intuitions that I was quote unquote supposed to have. Started asking a bunch of questions, and realized that I thought I was agnostic, right? Wound up telling my family, like, hey, I don't actually believe this stuff anymore. And by the way, now that I'm 22, like I'm moving halfway across the country. And the girl I've been dating for 5 years, she's coming with me.
Oh.
And my parents let me know that if I wanted to still be part of the family, I had to marry her before I left, or else, like, if I'm living in sin, then I'm that's not okay. So we had a shotgun wedding. We got married. We had a 3-month engagement. Needless to say, that soured the entire Catholic Church for me. Right. So I can't pretend like I'm this, bastion of logic and I'm completely unmoved by anything personal. Sure. Getting forced into a marriage when you're 22 is kind of crappy, but then after that, I already had all these questions. I had already considered myself not Catholic by this point. But I realized, like, okay, like, I guess if I'm going to be agnostic, I really need to like make sure that Catholicism isn't like what it says that it is, right? Like, and if it is, I better change my ways. So at that point, I started to really deep as deep as I can go anyway, as deep as I'm capable of investigation of the Catholic Church, not just of like the claims of, like the Gospels, not like the things that, that too, but I started doing deep dives on things like Marian apparitions, Eucharistic miracles, a lot of philosophy, honestly, too, a lot of philosophy. And that was all 6 years ago, I guess, that I kind of started this deep dive. And then 2 years ago, I started a YouTube channel. So I do, my YouTube channel is mostly like weird 45-minute long videos about obscure saints and their writings and stuff. Oh, thanks. That was Molly. But yeah, so I go like really deep on like random Marian apparitions that nobody's ever heard of before and stuff. But that's how I grew up. Like, I grew up praying to I would like every day as part of the rosary, I would say, like, Our Lady of Fatima, pray for us. Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray for us. Our Lady of La Salette, pray for us. Our Lady of Mount Carmel, pray for us. It was like a ritual that we would do every day. So it matters to me, and even if it matters to nobody else, it matters to me. So that's kind of my YouTube channel. And so I was super excited when Dale reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I've got a friend, Dane, and Dane is looking into Eucharistic miracles." And Dale, I don't remember if your email also said he's looking like Marian apparition stuff. I'm happy to talk about any of those things, but if we spend all of our time today on just Eucharistic miracles, I'm happy to do that. That only. But if the conversation kind of naturally drifts, I'm also happy to go other places too.
Are you good to take audience questions too, Kevin?
Yes, I'm absolutely good to take audience questions.
There you go, audience. If you have a question for Kevin or the rest of the panel, anytime during this, please put it in the chat, and also super chats on Faith Unaltered. I know we're streaming, Kevin, to your channel as well. But if you're watching on Faith Unaltered, super chats get priority, and so that will bump you up to the top of the list. All right.
I
interrupt.
will not answer super chats on my channel. If you want to ask a question, make sure that you super chat on Faith Unaltered.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding too. If you super chat on my channel, I will not.
Really? Okay.
You have to super chat Faith Unaltered.
Oh, that's so nice.
I feel like I'm not going to get super chats, or don't want them. I mean, I don't want them now. Like, don't super chat this episode, guys.
No, but yeah. So for the audience, as Tyler said, I started the questions for one of them, and we'll save that for the end. John, I got you. I messed up with John, so I'll just say I sincerely apologize. I was supposed to meet with him on Sunday night. He was going to give me tips for the Shabir episode, and my internet messed up. He probably thinks I'm lying about that, but Tyler, my internet sometimes comes and goes. So,
yep.
Yeah, I'm not lying about that. But anyways, I think we want to get straight into.
He lied. He really did. He lied. Oh, you guys can hear me? Oh, I thought I was muted. Crap.
But yeah, I want to have each side kind of give their opening cases, and it makes sense to start with the affirmative case. I'm praying that Dane's internet will hold out and stuff, but Dane,
I think I'm working now.
Awesome. So yeah, go ahead and give kind of your opening case from Eucharistic miracles and Marian apparitions. If you want to include that, it's all good.
Yeah, the Marian stuff is really cool too. So we'll see if we have time to get into that later. But I was telling Dale and I was telling Kevin as well that I'm not an expert in this, and so I've really just started getting interested in looking at this. And so my case is going to be pretty surface level.
You're kind of an inquirer at this point.
Yeah,
I would
I'm
say.
Inquiring. I'm not like a Catholic priest who's done seminary studies on this, but I've read some interesting articles, watched some interesting YouTube videos on it, and definitely my interest has been piqued. So I would say the case would basically be this: there are legitimate instances of witnesses to something strange happening at a mass, right? Where a priest drops a host on the floor, puts it into the water so that it's supposed to dissolve, and then they check back up on it later and it didn't dissolve, but it's turned into flesh and blood, allegedly. And then they, in certain situations, send this to laboratories where scientists, some secular, some religious, I guess it depends on the context in which miracle we're talking about, which scientists we're talking about, they come back and they typically say that it does have DNA fragments, that it does have white blood cells, that the tissue appears to be living, that it's not just dried, decayed, dead, but still has white blood cells actively there, that it comes from heart muscle, and that it comes from a heart that appears to have been in distress or in agony. And then there are even instances of people who were not believers. They test this stuff. I think one of the guys' names was let's see, I should have his name correct. Castanyan. He wasn't a believer.
Castanyan Gomez,
yes. He wasn't a believer, but apparently converted to Catholicism after studying these miracles. There's Zigabe, who worked on the Shroud of Turin, and he confirmed that these were real. And apparently there's a story that's told that he was speechless for about 5 minutes after he's told that what they were seeing was a host that had become flesh. And so I suppose the evidence is basically in do we trust the eyewitnesses that they didn't tamper with it or inject blood into it? Do we trust that the church handled these cases with in a legitimate way, with care and not manipulating the facts? Do we trust that the scientists did a good job in reporting? And some of these miracles have been approved by Rome, not all of them, but some of them have been approved, which would be like the stamp of approval. So the church is teaching that these are legitimate, and the church is teaching that these actually happened. And so now it's beyond just the authority of an eyewitness. Now it's got the entire weight of the church behind it. And that goes a long way. And there are photographs of these hosts, so you can actually see what it looks like. So that they're not just making up a story. You can actually see photographs of bread that appears to be half bread, half human flesh, kind of a thing. They're kind of freaky looking pictures, actually. So I suppose I'm just compelled to believe eyewitness reports of faithful priests and laity. I'm compelled to believe that the scientists weren't doing anything sketchy. And another interesting piece of it is that it's the same blood type AB that's found on the shroud. So you start connecting the dots of all these miracles. That's pretty cool. And then here's another really interesting piece. They find DNA fragments on these hosts, but they're never able to get what's called an amplified DNA. And I'm not a scientist by any stretch. I'm just a nerdy old Bible thumping theologian. But apparently, to get an amplified DNA result, it's getting the longer sequence in place, and they're unable to do this on all the different hosts. And this is pure speculation, but it's just a fun thing to speculate about. Is perhaps the reason that they're unable to get the amplified DNA is because Jesus's DNA is so unique, not having a biological father, but only having the biological mother, and the father in heaven actually supernaturally taking care of the rest of the DNA, right? And so there's this speculation that why can't we get any amplified DNA off of any of these host fragments? Well, maybe it's because it's the Lord's DNA, and his is very supernatural and unique, and actually different from ours because of only having one biological parent. So that's just kind of another interesting little quirk in all of this. I'll show you all something that I've read. I'll just add it to the stage. So these are.
Me to bring it up, or can you bring it up yourself?
Yeah, I'm going to bring it up myself. So okay. I'm not going to read all of this, but y'all can. I can drop the link in the comments. Actually, that might be something people are interested in. So I'll just drop that in the comments. But this is from National Catholic Register, and it's 3 Eucharistic miracles which cases have undergone the most extensive scientific analysis. So this gives the cases from Buenos Aires, 1992, 94, 96. I'm probably going to butcher this, but Tixtla, Mexico, 2006, and Sokolka.
You nailed it.
2008. Yeah, I knew I would. And here are these images for people that are curious what it might kind of look like. So you can see kind of bloody bread and all this.
Hold on, Dane. Can I clarify something real quick? I don't mean to throw you off your game. Can I clarify something real quick?
Yeah.
So from the Orthodox, like in that manual I was talking about, I think it's like a priest handbook or something. Basically, they say if the bread looks like flesh and if the wine looks like blood, not necessarily the bread bleeding. Like, is that something different?
Yeah, the bread, sometimes you'll see them say like it oozed, like oozing out blood.
Okay.
So some of these, let me see if that's in this even. Yeah, so in the Tixtla, Mexico one in 2006, it said the host that the nun was holding actually began to ooze a reddish substance. So it's as if it was actively bleeding.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So really, really interesting. And anyway, like I said, I don't have some kind of, I really don't have a very formal presentation or anything like that. Just wanted
That's
to
fine.
sort of share the articles I'm reading and that kind of thing. So again, I guess the case is basically, it's undeniable that something was brought, like some substance that had human, that appeared like flesh or blood was brought forth from these masses. And I guess the question is, was it something supernatural? Did the priest or the laity tinker with it? Did the scientists get it wrong when they studied in their lab? Was there fraud? But with the photographic evidence, I mean, there is something, physically here that we can look at and study. And so like I said, maybe Kevin by the end of the night will make me say, "Oh, I was silly for ever believing in any of this."
That's the goal.
But it seems to me like there's something going on here, and I don't have the details totally on the top of my mind, but there was one of those three cases there where the scientists were saying the blood was actually coming from it internally, and so there was evidence basically that it wasn't placed on it from outside, but it actually originated on the inside and came out. So that would also lead us to think, well, maybe this wasn't being tinkered with by the priest or the laity or something like that.
That's interesting.
So anyway, I'll guess I'll wrap up with that. And I wish I was more like formally presenting it, but hopefully people still got something out of that.
I think it's fun that you are basically giving this a play-by-play, right? And you're kind of presenting the evidence to us as you find it, because no one here is expecting you to be an expert at this, right?
Yeah.
You're just saying, hey, look, I find this really interesting. I find the claims really interesting. Let's present it to somebody that knows about this, and let's get their opinion on it. Now, obviously, people disagree about this, so we usually do a positive case first and then a negative case. But in this sense, we're switching it up, and so we'll bring on a positive case later. But I'm very interested to what Kevin has to say. And by the way, just for anybody in the audience that's not normally a part of this group, by the way, subscribe if you're interested in this kind of stuff. But I give Dane. So what's the word? I don't want to say hell, but that for studying Roman Catholicism. It's not because I'm agnostic or an atheist. I'm Eastern Orthodox. And so there's that divide that where I don't want him going Roman Catholic. And so that's why. So it's not anything else other than that.
And just for the sake of the audience,
it's all in fun.
Yeah. For the sake of the audience that may not be familiar with me, because I know some of Kevin's subscribers are here and real seekers and everything.
Welcome.
I'm ordained in the United Methodist Church and fixing to take a leave of absence from preaching ministry. Actually, this Sunday will be my last Sunday preaching because I'm concerned with the direction of the UMC for all the obvious reasons that we don't have to get into. If you've seen the news around the UMC over the last few months, you know what I'm talking about. And anyway, as I take that leave, I'm interested in exploring the Christian traditions that claim to have apostolic authority and apostolic succession, because it's really hit me hard how a Protestant denomination that I've been raised in and loved so dearly could literally just upend 2,000 years worth of church tradition in a single day with a single vote. And I was like, that can't be how Christ meant for this to go down. And so that's where I'm at, just so the audience knows. I'm still currently a Protestant, but I'm excited with this journey ahead where I can explore the RCC, the EO, and I'm even looking at Anglicanism and trying to, because they're like Protestants who want to be like, but we're not really Protestant, So anyway,
kinda
not to veer us off the trail, but that's kind of, I just want people to know where I was coming from if they weren't familiar with me.
Right on.
Awesome.
No,
All right,
thank you.
cool. Well, at this point, I think we'll go to Kevin for his opening speech, opening case on these Eucharistic miracles. Yeah, just let me know when. Do you want to share your slides from the beginning or at certain points?
I think what I'll do, if it's okay, is I'll make a short opening statement, and then we can kind of like actually dive into the Eucharistic miracles that we want to talk about, because
Yeah.
I'd love to get into the nitty gritty. So what I'll do is I'll make a short, just a few minute opening statement, and then we can dive into it if that's cool.
Yeah,
Let's-
sounds good.
okay.
Let's
Go
do
for
it.
Awesome. So, Dane, one thing that you said was, I hope Kevin doesn't make me feel silly. That is absolutely never my goal ever. The way that I like to view conversations like this, debates, if you will, is that it is never Kevin versus Dane. It is never the agnostic versus the Methodist or the Catholic, or no, it is Kevin and Dane versus falsehoods. We are trying to beat the falsehoods into submission, because I think that Dane and I are on the same team. We both want to believe all the true things, and we want to disbelieve all the false things. So the way that I see it is we're on the same team. I don't think it's ever about making anybody seem silly. I don't, if a debate ever turns into that, I think that that's not a debate worth having anymore. But with that being said, let's kind of embark on this journey and kind of figure out. The other word that Dane used was credible. Like, it seems like there are some credible. I don't think that they're super credible. And let me tell you why. I put together a little bit of a deepish dive on 4 Eucharistic miracles, and these are going to be the 4 biggest ones that you ever hear anybody talking about. In fact, Dane shared a slide or a picture of like a CNA article, Catholic News Agency, that had 3 of the 4 that I'm going to talk about. And it was only talking about 3. So the 3 that it was talking about on that article was Buenos Aires, Tixtla, and Skokolka. And the only one that I'm going to add is Lanciano, Italy. That's the only one that I'm going to add. And funnily enough, that article said that those 3 are the best evidence, like the best scientific evidence, and it listed Tixtla, Buenos Aires, and Skokolka. I think that Lanciano is by far and away the best evidence. Like, it is not even close. We'll get into more specifically why later, but in my opening statement, I would like to touch on a couple of themes that I think are going to come up again and again and again while we look at these Eucharistic miracles. And the first is going to be something that I'm calling a cult of personality. Good science. So by the way, by education, I'm an engineer. I have my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and I currently work in pharmaceuticals. So I manage clinical trials. But part of clinical trials is looking at pieces of organ tissue on slides. So I'm a little bit familiar, and looking at blood samples and things like that too. So I'm a little bit familiar with this topic just from my career, but regardless, there's a few themes. The first thing I want to talk about is a cult of personality. A mark of good science is that it doesn't matter who does the science, right? A mark of good science, who cares about the scientist, right? Show me your work. In 3 of the 4 cases, there is no work that has been shown. The only one of the 4 that I'm going to talk about tonight that has shown any work is Lanciano, which oddly enough from that CNA article didn't mention Lanciano. And that's okay. It's just the CNA. They're, it's kind of like a tabloid. Instead of talking about the work, I'll notice that there are a lot of these like little Catholic pamphlets that are handed out where they talk about the scientists. So Dane mentioned Dr. Castellan Gomez, Dr. Ricardo Castellan Gomez. I'm going to talk a little bit about Dr. Gomez. I'm going to talk also about Linoli. And I'm also that's another guy, and his name is Dr. Linoli. And I'm also going to talk about the guy who did Buenos Aires. So we'll get there when we get to my slides. But a cult of personality is something to look out for, and I think it's a mark of bad science. I think when we're spending more time talking about the scientists rather than the science, I think that's a bad sign. Another thing too is there's a lot of talk about how the scientists are, some of them are non-believers, and in my experience, that's actually not the case. In all of these cases, we are going to see that it appears as if the teams who are investigating this are purposely seeking out Catholic-friendly scientists. We will see more about that as we kind of dive into each one. And there's also going to be really weird statements being made, statements that they just don't make sense from a scientific perspective. Statements that I'm talking about are actually, Dane mentioned a few of them. So looking at a little slide and looking at a piece of heart tissue on a slide and saying like, oh, this looks like the heart is in distress. Yeah, it looks like the heart's in distress. It's outside of a body.
It's on a slide.
It looks like, of course. So if you actually, when you work in pharma and you're trying to like look at it, like, you know, if maybe there's a heart medicine, and so you take, believe it or not, in clinical trials, if we want to figure out if a drug is working, sometimes we have to take samples from patients after we give them the drug. And if it's a heart medicine, we might cut off a little sliver of their heart and then look at it under a microscope to make sure that the drug is doing what we think it's doing, what we hope it's doing anyway. That sample of heart that you're looking at under a microscope is always going to look distressed. So saying that it looks distressed, you know, I don't think that's a very scientific thing to say. And it would worry me if I saw a peer-reviewed journal article that used language like that. Luckily, in the case of these Eucharistic miracles, there are no peer-reviewed journal articles. Unluckily for Eucharistic miracles, though, there are no peer-reviewed scientific journal articles. So I think that the cult of personality and then the weird sayings that we find in these non-peer-reviewed articles that are written are just really worrying signs. And I guess if there's one word that I can use to describe Eucharistic miracles, and I actually use the same word to describe Marian apparitions, it's disappointing. There's a lot of legend that gets built up around events like this. Because they're exciting. Of course they're exciting. You think that you find something, especially if you grow up like I do, you know, you grow up steeped in this culture. And then like, oh my gosh, like I remember hearing about Tixtla back in 2006. I was still in grade school at that point. So I'm 28, just to let you know. I was born in 95. But I remember Tixtla. Like it was a big deal. So of course we get excited. And then the stories grow over time. When you look into them, the actual science that is done is often inadequate, and the word that I will use is disappointing. Now, I'm going to present the evidence, and I'm going to sit here and call it disappointing. You, and this is the royal you, this is not Dane, you, the audience, you might look at this evidence and you might be like, wait, this is awesome evidence. This is all that I need. I'm in. And at that point, all that I say to you is, you know, I tip my hat and I say, all right, like good game. Because at the end of the day, all that we have is the evidence. And I can't tell you if the evidence is or is not convincing, because whether or not something is convincing is by definition subjective. And so the goal for me tonight is actually not to convince anybody. My goal is to present the evidence in as scientific a way as possible. By scientific, I just mean I'm going to try to strip away any of the legend that surrounds these events, so that we can just look at the evidence and then everybody can kind of come to their own conclusion. And if 100 people watch this and all 100 people had an opinion, they look at the evidence and they realize that the opinion that they had all along was correct, and I do not change a single mind, that honestly, that's great. As long as you learned something new today, I view that as a win. Because like I said, it's all of us together on this quest to believing as many true things as possible. And if I'm giving you more information, then we've already won. Nobody's mind needs to change in order for us all to win. I'm going to leave my opening statement there, but I'm super excited to jump into specific Eucharistic miracles. And that way we can get into the nitty gritty. Yeah,
absolutely.
Can I just say real quick, Kevin, I really love the way you speak. Like you're like a storyteller. And you're just, even though I am messing with Dale in the side chat here, like you just captivate me. And I'm like, you know, I'm not trying to be weird or nothing, but it's like you remind me of our co-host Joshua Davidson. And like you're just very captivating. And so this is going to be a fun episode. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I have you all fooled.
Yeah, there you go.
At all.
Deceived by the agnostic.
That's right. It's all part of my agnostic plan.
Yeah.
All
Right on. Well,
oh,
good.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say I appreciate what you said there at the end about, even if we don't change our minds, like we have new knowledge at this point. And so that's what we're here all about is preventing, or not preventing, but providing clarity with charity. And I think that that's really going to show forth through in this episode. But Dale, over to you.
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure I want to say anything now because no one ever compliments me on my voice or my. In fact, I get insults. Harry.
Well, if you'd get a new mic, Dale, you'd be fine.
All right, but yeah, I think what we can do, we can open it up now to kind of an informal discussion back and forth. And
Yeah, let's do it.
you know, I know Kevin has a slide. Let's take it. You know, you guys mentioned there are 4 of the main ones. Let's take it one at a time, I guess. Like, Dane, do you have one in particular you want to start off with discussing with Kevin?
Well, you know, just for the sake of time, I think it'd be most interesting to talk about the one he finds most convincing, the Lanciano.
Agreed.
But
Agreed.
before we do that, I did have one kind of follow up to the opening statement, and
Yeah.
I also echo what Tyler just said. Really, really enjoyable presentation from you, and I like your spirit and
Thank you.
your charity. It's very heartwarming. It's going to be a fun night here. So you mentioned how talking about like a distressed heart muscle, not a very scientific way to talk about it because, of course, it's distressed when it's outside of the body. The way that I had understood that is that basically there are signs that a medical doctor, a coroner, or a doctor, or a scientist could look for that would show a heart that sort of was at ease and peaceful as it passes versus one that is maybe undergoing extreme agony, abuse, torment, torture, whatever it may be. That's the way I took it. So it sounds like what you're saying is if someone dies peacefully in their sleep, or if someone dies by crucifixion, the heart's going to look the same to the coroner either way.
No, not to the coroner. But who's looking at these samples? A coroner? No, a histologist.
Okay. Yeah.
So histology, this is for the audience. I know that Dane, I know that. So histology is like the science of looking at little slivers of organ on a slide. Okay. And the piece of organ has to be prepared in a certain way, you know, so I won't get into all of it, but histology is not the same thing as like an autopsy. When somebody dies, the person who's performing the autopsy is going to be able to take a look at a chest and see if that chest was caved in by a club or like a car accident or something, or if there's a huge, you know, knife wound in the chest or something. And so the person performing the autopsy is going to have a pretty good idea if the heart received, you know, blunt force trauma or was pierced with a blade of some sort or something like that. A histologist isn't going to know that. A histologist is looking at cells under a microscope from a sliver of organ on a slide. It's just not the same thing. And so a histologist isn't going to be like, oh yes, I could tell that this person was crucified. Like that's not how histology works.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah. So if we were to have had the body of Christ on, you know, day 1 in the tomb, you could tell the abuse of the heart.
Oh,
but
for sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right, here's what I think would be fun for us to do. Let's jump into whatever slides you've got on Lanciano and go from there. Cause if you think that's the most compelling case, then that would be the most beneficial for us to spend our time on.
Cool. And I don't even actually have slides. What I have though is just a couple of tabs that I would like to pull up.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna kind of present to you the evidence, and then I'll kind of give you, I guess, my evaluation. But then Dane, I'd be super interested to hear your evaluation of the evidence too. And like I said, I do think that Lanciano is the strongest. I'm going to tell the Lanciano story in an out of order way because I think it's going to make more sense if I do it this way. But with that, let's kind of jump into the evidence for Lanciano. I'm going to go ahead and try to zoom in a little bit to make this a little bit more readable. But okay, I understand that this is in Italian, but mostly we're going to be looking at pictures, and then I do have an English translation for you on the next tab here, and so we are going to look at that. But if you see this, you can actually see right here, that's the Roman numeral for 7, and then that's the Italian word for century. So you can see here that it says 7th century. So this is a scientific article that was written in the 7th century.
Oh, wow.
That's a joke. It was not written in the 7th century.
Wow.
This was written in like 1972 or something like that. It was in the 1970s.
Bro, let me just stop you, Kevin, real quick and say you can say anything about this and I'll believe it. That's how gullible I am. So I really thought for a second this was actually written in the 7th century. It's just transcribed to this like nice little PDF here. So
no, and like look, if I scrolled a little bit, the joke would it would have been better if I scrolled over here first.
Yeah.
These are actually these are histological pictures. So there was this doctor named Dr. Linoli, and he worked at a university in Italy, and he was a histologist. So his job, like what he did, was he looked at organs under microscopes, to put it like bluntly. And so he was approached by a Catholic organization saying, hey, would you please take a look at this organ tissue and tell us what you think it is? And we're going to take a look at the English in a second. But before we do that, I just want to show you, this is the actual PDF. Like, go ahead and read this. If you speak Italian, go ahead. If you don't, we will get there. But I think the important part over here is tissue, the actual images that he includes. So I will tell you that I do manage clinical trials, but I don't actually look at the results like this. That's not my job. So I have no idea what I'm looking at here, frankly, if I'm being honest. However, from what I understand, this is almost definitely human heart tissue. Mr. Skeptic guy over here admitting this is almost definitely human heart tissue. Dr. Linoli includes different images, all of the same stuff. And it all paints what appears to be a fairly compelling picture that what he's looking at under the microscope is indeed human heart tissue. And hey, I mean, take a look at this. This looks like it's published in some kind of journal, right?
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Kind of. Let's take a look at the English. So this is literally, I can share this with anybody in case anybody wants to double check me, but I literally sat there and typed in the the Italian into Google Translate because this is just a scan. So I did that myself. So there could be errors in this, but this should be pretty close to what it actually says. And it's interesting to actually read the English, because when you start reading the English, it doesn't sound like a scientific journal article. To begin, we have ancient Christian tradition has handed down to us that at the beginning of the 7th century, a friar of the Basilian order, while officiating mass in the church near Lanciano, doubtful of the truth inherent of the sacred rite, revealed with great dismay, together with the people present, the transformation of the host into flesh and the wine into blood. Memory of this event has never been lost through the centuries. Well, okay. That's a little bit of a weird way to start a scientific journal article, right?
A little bit.
This isn't a scientific journal article. It was never actually peer-reviewed. It was never actually published in a scientific journal article. It was published in Dr. Linoli's own journal, where he just published his own work. And so in that sense, this is actually not it's not nothing, in the sense that he published his work and it's out there and you and I get to look at it, which is awesome. And it's actually much better than what we're going to be looking at for future Eucharistic miracles. But this was not peer reviewed. This was not published in an actual scientific journal article, because those. And by the way, I'm saying the same thing twice when I say that. In order to be published in a scientific journal article, it has to be peer reviewed. This was not peer reviewed.
Right.
he does go on to explain the he talks about, let's see, small holes can be seen. The consistency of the tissue is uniform. The goals is he wants to establish which biological species the flesh belongs to. So it has the markings. He's talking about what methods he's using for analyzing it. And there's that word histological. Histology is the study of putting organs on slides and looking at them with a microscope. So, this isn't nothing. And I don't want to undersell the evidence that we have here. But I do think it's important to note that this is not peer reviewed. And so, we should approach this with some amount of caution, but hey, you and I can quote unquote peer review right now by looking at it. Okay.
Kevin,
yeah.
Can I just ask a very quick follow-up question
Mhm.
on that? Do you know, so I recognize this wasn't a proper peer-reviewed process when he published the original paper there, but he did publish it in his own journal. Do you know if there was ever any response to this paper in subsequent journals, or?
Not that I know of, and the ways that I would know to check would only work for things that have been published since the dawn of the internet, and this is prior to the dawn of the internet. Like, there are tools that you can look at to like trace papers. You can trace the lineage of a paper. Like, you could be like, this paper quoted that one, quoted that one, quoted that one. But that only works for papers in databases, and I don't think that this paper is in like a database, because I don't think that this paper kind of doesn't exist in the scientific community, if that makes sense. Because if it was never officially published, then it's not like a real paper. It's kind of like, can you find my homework assignments in a database of? No, you can't. And obviously this is somewhat better than a homework assignment because it's written by a professor and not by a student.
Fair enough. But
cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. But I do want to so the science to me really isn't the problem here. I'm convinced that what Dr. Lannoli looked at is human tissue, probably from a heart. I believe him, but I have issues with Lanciano. What are those? Well, it's actually right here, 7th century, and you can see that here. VII, the Roman numeral for 7, seculo, 7th century. This was done in 1970. It was done after 1971. I think it was like 72 or 73 or something like that. That this paper was written. There's a lot of time in between the 7th century and the 20th century, right? There's 13 centuries between that. What the heck was going on for those 13 centuries? Well, I actually don't think that 13 centuries did go by between the collection of this sample and the analysis of this sample. I do think that it was a couple hundred years, but I don't think that it was 1,300 years. And why? Well, the briefest glance at the historicity of the miracle of Lanciano shows that it's a legend, it's a myth. So this is just a screenshot literally from Wikipedia. So, it's not the most reliable thing in the world, but the first known reports of the event date to 1574 and do not specify the exact year in which it would have occurred. 1574. That's the 16th century. And then some believe that certain circumstances allow it to be placed chronologically around 730 to 750. So 8th century. But there is absolutely no record of this miracle for the first 800 years of its existence. That's a telltale sign that this thing is a medieval money grab, because this is what medieval churches did. They would all of a sudden have these holy relics that were ancient, right? Do you know how much breast milk of Mary you could find in medieval churches? It's crazy. You could find, it's wild. Like, they would just, I found this jug and it's got like, this vase. This vase is 1,500 years old and it has Mary's breast milk in it. Like, no, it doesn't. This is an attempt by a church to draw pilgrims to their church so that the pilgrims will donate and they'll get rich. we all of a sudden in the year 1574 start hearing legends of this Eucharistic miracle that occurred somewhere around the year 750. I don't think that a whole bunch of monks in 1574 like got together and were like, ooh, let's make this story up. But what I do think happened is somebody somewhere decided to make up a story, probably within 100 years before 1574. But then within a few generations, like the origin was kind of forgotten. All that remained was this legend of the miracle of Lanciano. That's not the 800 years of silence isn't the only thing that gives me pause about the miracle of Lanciano. If you look up top right here, this incident is similar to the tradition known as the Mass of St. Gregory, first recorded in the 8th century. The Mass of St. Gregory is another Christian myth. And this one is legitimately really old. And it's about St. Gregory, and he's saying the Mass, and he actually doubts that the Eucharist is really the body and blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. But then as he's doubting, it's literally turning into Jesus's body in front of him. And he's like, oh, shoot, this really is Jesus's body, blood, soul, and divinity. That story is considerably older than the miracle of Lanciano. So what I imagine happened is in the 16th century, maybe in the 15th century, some monks were either inspired by the legend of St. Gregory, and they had their own host, that they had their own specimen, and they were like, this is that thing. So I don't think that it was necessarily like malicious. Like I don't think that there was a whole bunch of monks who were scheming to make money. That's possible. But I find it more likely that this was just a mistake of some sort. Like, generational telephone kind of broke down at some point, and then this turned into the myth that we have today. But the 800 years of silence and the weird similarities to the Mass of St. Gregory, to me, paint this whole thing as a myth. Now, I did fully admit that the histological work that Dr. Lanois did in the 1970s, to me, it looks like it's human heart tissue. So I do think that sometime between the year 750 and 1574, somebody took a sample of human heart tissue and put it in a monstrance. I think that happened. Oh, and sorry, that's the monstrance is that's a very Catholic word that sometimes I just use Catholic words and I think that everybody knows what I'm talking about. But the monstrance is this metallic structure that you would use to display a host. So I do think that over the course of 800 years, sometime within that 800 years, somebody legitimately put a piece of human heart tissue in there. And then you seal that up between two pieces of glass, and guess what? That's kind of like histology, And so samples can actually survive for a pretty long time. And I think that Dane actually pulled up this exact picture. That's not going to work too well, is it? Well, there you go. You can kind of see that there. That exact picture is, I think, one that Dane pulled up. That's what's left of the tissue. But for the record, I think that whatever's in there, it really is human heart tissue. I just think that the chain of custody problem with the 800 years of silence and the similarities to the Mass of St. Gregory, to me, just paint this whole thing as being like pretty fishy. Yeah. So that's what I have to say about the miracle of Lanciano. I presented the evidence, and then the I think it's pretty fishy is clearly my opinion. That's not the evidence anymore. That's what I think of it. But Dane, I would love to hear your thoughts about Lanciano.
Yeah, thanks. I definitely think the chain of custody issue is a big deal. That's actually one of the reasons why I didn't bring Lanciano up in my original opening, is because that exact reason. It's so long ago. Whereas Tixtla or Buenos Aires or the ones in Poland, they're 21st century or 20th century. So it's a little easier to know how we came to possess them in our hands, right? So I agree with you that if you're going to use Lanciano as evidence of Eucharistic miracles, you're going to have to swallow that pill of like, well, I just take it on, I take it on faith, basically, that the heart tissue that was studied in the 1900s was genuinely the same heart tissue from the 7th century. And that's a faith. Like at that point, you are resting in faith, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with resting in faith. but it's not going to compel a skeptic, right? And so that's definitely an issue. I'm curious, you were mentioning it wasn't a peer-reviewed paper. Has anybody like engaged with this professor's work? Like, has anybody taken his? You were kind of comparing it to like it's almost like a homework assignment, but the professor did it. It's like a professor's little side project. Has anybody of note engaged with it? And said, hey, actually, even though this isn't a peer-reviewed paper, the methodology is really good, or something like that. Do you know of anybody that's kind of looked at it and said, the process he used was solid?
Not to my knowledge. So the way that these things generally go is scientists aren't generally trying to go peer review each other's homework. Generally, if a scientist wants another scientist to interact with his work, he will publish it in a scientific journal article. That scientific journal article will require that scientist to get his work peer reviewed first. So the onus was kind of on Dr. Linoli to get other people to review his work, and he never did that for whatever reason. And to the best of my knowledge, no scientist was ever like, well, even though Dr. Linoli didn't ask, I'm going to go ahead and just peer review his paper anyway. But something that's important to remember is that peer review isn't only just supposed to be like reading your paper. They're actually supposed to try to replicate your work.
Mm-hmm.
So like theoretically, a peer reviewer would go grab another sample of the same host fragment and then do their own work, be like, yep, nope, checks out. Like this all makes sense. And that was never done. At least, and I don't know of anybody else doing any other kind of peer review. It's possible that it was out there and it just never got anywhere, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't know of anything.
I have a couple follow-ups. If Dane, did you have more to go or no? Okay, so I'm kind of interested in the dating of this, because you said even as a skeptic, you're willing to admit that this is genuine heart tissue and that sort of thing, and it dates back. You're comfortable saying a couple centuries, kind of thing. Now, I'm just kind of, is there any way for us to just by looking at it to date it? Like why not suggest it went back to the 16th century or something like that? Like, do we have any way of telling from looking at the tissue itself how old it is?
So, I mean, theoretically, we could do radiocarbon dating.
There you go.
We haven't. And the that 16th century date of 1574, that's just the earliest reference that we have found to the host of Lanciano. We haven't found anybody talking about it before then. So nobody is trying to say, oh, this piece of human heart tissue is definitely dated to, the 16th century. All that we're saying is nobody talked about the miracle of Lanciano prior to 1574. So the legend stating that this goes all the way back to the 7th century seems pretty weird, because nobody seems to know about it for the first 800 years of its existence. That dating work could be done theoretically, but it has not been done. And the Catholic Church would need to ask somebody to do that work because they own the Lanciano host right now. So until the church asks somebody to do radiocarbon dating, it won't be done.
Can I ask a question? What's the reference, do you know, Kevin, of that 1574? Like, what's that in?
I believe it's in an abbot, like an abbey. Like, I think that they found some monks writing about the miracle of Lanciano in the 16th century.
Okay.
And just for Campo, he's saying thanks, but he asks another question kind of related to dating. I'm just wondering, like, even if we could date this miracle, far back, let's say even to the 6th century, there were accounts of this. How would we know that this thing that was tested in the 20th century was the same? Same tissue? Maybe every few centuries they swap it out or something like that. Yeah, like, what are your guys' thoughts? We can't
know. Yeah. Now, the chain of custody on this one is very poor.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Well, yeah, if you guys are good with the Lanciano one, do you guys want to move on to the next one, or Dane? What's up to you guys?
Let's move on. Let's do you were talking about Gomez and the cult of personality there. So let's talk about the ones that he oversaw. I know he was involved with Buenos Aires. He was also involved with Tixtla.
He was. Do you want to go chronologically though?
Yeah, let's do chronologically.
Cool.
And I know you were saying that he didn't do any papers that were peer reviewed either, right?
Correct.
But he is like a legitimate scientist. Or no?
No, he's not. And he also didn't do any of the work.
Okay,
He was like the lead investigator, kind of.
gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So we were talking about the 1970s for Lanciano. Well, we were also talking about the 7th century, but fast forward. Now it's 1992. There is a church in Buenos Aires, and they report a Eucharistic miracle. Then it happens again in 1994. Then it happens again in 1996. So clearly something's going on in this church, right? Exciting. Well, if you grew up like I did, you might find like little printouts like this. And, these might have been given to you as part of your religion class when you were in 5th and 6th grade and all that stuff. Take a look at this little printout. So it's only a single page, right? Doesn't it look like this used to be longer? It looks that way to me. And guess what? I made a YouTube video on this miracle 2 years ago, and it did used to be longer. I'm worried that my YouTube video caused them. So take a look at this. This is from a year ago. Look, 3 pages. And if you follow the link in my YouTube video, so I try to link all my sources all the time. And so look, I'm linking the National Catholic Register. But here's the pamphlet. If you click on the pamphlet now, it brings you to this 1-page thing that we are looking at here.
So Kevin, can I, just to be fair to the Roman Catholics, because I looked into this and you're right, but you're also wrong. So what they did is that they have separate links for each of the 3 pages. So that's what happened. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
I need to pull those up then.
Cool.
Because that'll be better than, let's see. How would I find it? Would I just Google like Buenos Aires Eucharistic miracle and see what comes up?
I posted all 3 pages on my blog for the show that we did.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can try to, if you know where that is. Or I can.
Yeah, maybe I'll go grab it. But I guess I can start talking here while I grab it on a different screen. So this is the first time that we're going to hear about Dr. Ricardo Castañón Gomez. We actually have a picture of him right here. Okay. So here is Professor Castañón Gomez. Castañón is not his first name. His last name is Castañón Gomez, I think. I believe his first name is Ricardo. But he was put in charge of investigating the Eucharistic miracles that occurred in Buenos Aires in 92, 94, and 96. You can see here that samples of the host were drawn. There's a little test tube with a sample of the host in there. You can also see down here pictures of like what the host looked like. And I'm going to ask a very leading question. Does that look like something to you? Does that look like mold by any chance to you? Okay, we're going to come back to that. So let me grab the second page and let me. I can get to your. Dale, will you just drop a link in the private chat, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. If you hang on 1 second, because I got it right here. So the second.
No
page,
worries. I can talk about it while you're pulling that up. And thank you for the help.
It right now. There it is.
Thank you. You're the best. Okay.
No worries. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, appreciate you. Okay, so here's page 2 and 3. Oh, there's 2 again. Sorry, my bad. This works for now. Okay, so testing was done on this, not by Dr. Zugaba. I'm sorry, not by Dr. Castañón Gomez. He doesn't actually do any of the testing. But he did have a local Argentinian scientist take a look at the samples. And we're going to get to Zugaba. I'm going to have to find it on the slide, but in 1990, let me look at my notes. So it was first analyzed in Argentina, and the scientist who analyzed it said that it was skin tissue, human skin tissue. And let's see if I want to find that so that you guys know I'm not just making this up. There's 3, there's 2, and there's 1. I'm going to control F for skin. Bear with me.
And while you
There it
find
is.
that, part 3 is up in the private chat for when you need it.
Perfect. Thank you. So Dr. Lawrence, he's this Dr. Robert Lawrence. So he's a histopathologist, and it was in the year 2000. So histopathologist Dr. Robert Lawrence took a look at the samples, and he said that they were human skin and white blood cells. Okay, human
That's
skin
interesting.
and white blood cells. Skin, not heart tissue. Okay. So maybe this one is skin. Like maybe this is a Eucharistic miracle, but just like let's not forget that Catholics don't claim that the Eucharist is Jesus's heart. No. Catholics claim that the Eucharist is Jesus's whole body,
Right.
including his blood. And by the way, it's also his soul, and by the way, it's also his divinity. So there's no reason for the Eucharist to be specifically his heart. Like there's nothing theologically incorrect with it being with being Jesus's skin. You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
Except on page 3, I guess they wanted an American scientist to take a look at it. So they found Professor Zugaba. That's how I say it. I don't know the right way to pronounce it, honestly. Zugabe. Okay. So Zugabe took a look at it. And so here we go. So that first testing was in the year 2000. They found it was human skin tissue. In 2004, 4 years later, Professor Zugabe took a look at it and, quote unquote, without knowing that it came from a consecrated host. And we're going to come back over here to Dr. Linoli in a second. But Zugabe found it to be human heart tissue. Let's see, where does it say that he found it to be heart tissue? Let me control F for heart, because here we go. In 2001, so this is a quote from Castellan Gomez. So in 2001, I went with my samples to Professor Linoli, who identified the white blood cells and said to me that the most probable samples corresponded to heart tissue. Wait a minute. Is it a heart tissue or skin tissue?
That's interesting.
And I'm sorry, but if you're a histopathologist, you have to be able to know the difference between skin cells and heart cells.
Yeah.
Like, this is your job, man. You went to medical school and you can't tell the difference between skin and heart. Like, I find that a little wild. Okay. Also, there's this whole big thing about how Zugabe he could not believe it. I do not believe it. He was greatly moved. And it was only when he became aware that the sample came from a consecrated, he had no idea that it came from a consecrated host. You know, some random Catholic investigator came up to him and was like, take a look at the sample. I'm not going to tell you come on. Of course it comes from a host. Like, we live in this culture, we meaning Catholics, we live in this culture where Eucharistic miracles are like part of our mythos. What do you mean you didn't expect anything? You're a heart histopathologist and a Catholic investigator asks you to take a look at a sample, but we're not going to tell you what it is. Come on. So Dr. Zugabe, I am positive, went into this thinking, oh, this is Eucharistic miracle. I'm going to say it's heart tissue. Even though maybe he wasn't aware that previous doctors had called it skin tissue. Also, a little more. In 2001, Professor Linoli confirmed that this was not skin, but a fragment of heart. Does that name sound familiar? Linoli? Linoli?
Yeah, he did Lanciano.
He did Lanciano. What is he doing again for Buenos Aires? They're just picking random professors, like they're doing real science, right? They're doing real science, and they just so happen to pick the same guy who confirmed Lanciano for them. Oh, what a happy coincidence. No. Dr. Castellan Gomez is the lead investigator, and he is seeking out medical professionals who are Catholic friendly. You can tell because he approached Linoli. You can also tell because he approached Zugabe. But Kevin, Dr. Zugabe hasn't been involved. Like Dr. Zugabe wasn't involved in Lanciano. That's exactly right. Dr. Zugabe was not involved in Lanciano. However, keep in mind, Zugabe, 2004. Guess what happened in? Oh, I'm gonna have to Google it. Sorry. I'm gonna look up Zugabe, and then it's called The Cross and the Shroud.
Oh, here you are, Dale.
What do we
Kevin's
have
gonna
here?
get on the shroud now.
So this doesn't have to do with the shroud per se. But
Oh,
take a look at this. 1988.
Mm.
Zugabe wrote a book where he is, and he's clearly pro shroud. So we're approaching scientists. We're just doing good science here, right? We're just doing a good investigation like the good Catholics we are, right? No, you're not. You're approaching scientists who are already friendly to the Catholic Church. I told you we're going to have this theme of not approaching secular scientists and cults of personality. So we approach Zugabe, who already wrote a book about the shroud and the crucifixion and stuff like that. So clearly, he's a committed Catholic.
Kevin, can I, apart from the hinting at the Catholic bias thing, I wanted to kind of ask you a follow up about your notion that, hey, Lanoli, he's coming up more than once in these types of experiments. So I just wanted to say, what's the relevance of that? Because that doesn't really prove anything. I mean, look at Walter Macron, that everyone goes to him to falsify the Vinland map and the Shroud of Turin. I guess Walter Macron, that's a little suspect, right? Or with Methchild Fleury-Limburg, they went to her as a textile expert in 1988 to talk about the shroud, and then they went to her in 2002 to restore the shroud. Like, there's nothing suspicious just because an expert's being used.
I disagree.
Okay.
And the reason I disagree is because I manage clinical trials. So can you imagine if there was a big pharma company that had a certain scientist who maybe was friendly to the pharma company, and that one scientist just kept on saying, "Oh yeah, these guys' drugs work. Yeah, they work. Yeah, trust them. It works. Would that be a little fishy? Probably. Do you think that FDA would be okay with that? No. FDA requires pharma companies to have their testing done by labs where they have teams of scientists. It's not just one guy that they're going to. So there's no reason why these guys couldn't have gone to a company like LabCorp, why they couldn't have gone to a company like Q2, to a company like PPD, part of Thermo Fisher Scientific, why they couldn't have gone to Icon Central Lab. There are tons of labs who have teams of PhD histopathologists ready to look at these samples. And then they could get reports that are GDP certified. And they could include those reports in these like little pamphlets if they wanted to.
Can I just jump?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, to add to what you're saying, because if it's legit, multiple sources can verify that to have more weight to the claim.
Bingo.
Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. So we have an initial scientist in Argentina who I legitimately know nothing about. Maybe this doctor in Argentina was like secular, maybe, but he said it was skin tissue. I guess Castañón Gomez didn't like those results, so they brought it to Lanoli and Zugabe. Lanoli worked on Lanciano. Zugabe wrote a book on the shroud. Catholic-friendly scientists. They were like, oh, no, not human skin tissue, definitely heart tissue. That's called testing into compliance. You get a result you don't like, so you just repeat the test until you get a result that you do like. But this is even worse than testing into compliance, because it's not like they were asking the same scientist and we're just, hey, we're going to give you a new sample of the same host. No, they just sent new samples to new scientists. We're like, can you tell us that this is heart tissue? Yep, this is heart tissue. Great, thank you. We got what we wanted. And so I find that to be the mark of, I'm struggling to find like a charitable word. But so I work in pharma, right? Like this, I manage clinical trials. This stuff is like what I do. And FDA would have a field day with a report like this. Oh my gosh, this would not fly. Okay. So me saying this field day, this would not, that's clearly inflammatory language. That clearly I'm giving you my opinion at that point.
Sure.
But the data that I am presenting is that we have Catholic friendly scientists who are kind of testing into compliance here. And I didn't touch on the whole okay, take a look at this. Does that look like mold? I think that looks like mold. There is a red mold that looks like blood. If I just Google blood mold, let's see. Oh no, that's like actual people getting mold in their blood. That sounds really bad.
Ooh.
If I Google mold that looks like blood, I forget the scientific name. Let's see. So there's something called Hydenlum peckii. It's a fungus that appears like it looks like blood. So here are some images of this fungus.
Oh,
Yeah, it's pretty weird looking. And I don't know. I mean, I see the white wispy stuff growing above it. Like that looks like mold to me. This is me getting a little bit this is a little bit out there. But I don't know. And you have scientists calling it heart tissue and skin tissue. So there's no evidence that it's mold other than me just looking at these pictures and being like, I don't know, guys.
right.
But man, what I wouldn't give to have LabCorp, PPD, Thermo Fisher, Q2, like a real lab could look at these and tell us if it's mold or not. But that kind of work was never done.
I'll let Dane come back, but after he's done, I have something that's really important to say after this, because we have Dr. Zuckerby's own daughter in the audience. I don't think that's true.
No way.
But I have to say something. If she is his daughter, or even if she's not, for the sake of Zuckerby's family, I have to say something. But
Dale, private me the name. Private chat.
They're going by Christian F in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But if Dane has stuff to say first, I'll let him go first. But then at the end, I want to bring this up, or I can do it now, whatever you guys want. Do you do it now, or?
Well, yeah, you can bring it up. I mean, I'm just sort of soaking in Kevin's presentation, and mulling it all over. What I did want to clarify, and I think I already asked and just forgot. So Castellan Gomez, is he Catholic or not?
Oh yeah.
So what is the thing? In one of the articles I read, it said he converted because of these miracles. So is that false?
I don't know. Let me not speculate. I don't know.
Okay.
I do know of stuff that occurs after 1998 that I'm going to share before we get into Tixtla. But this only affects things like I don't know. I haven't found anything about Castellan Gomez prior to 1992 when the first Eucharistic miracle happened.
So is there?
So I don't know.
Do we have any background how he became kind of the point guy? Like, how did he make himself the figurehead that was going to start investigating all this?
I don't know. I wish I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. It's very interesting. Hey, Dale, when you're gonna talk about potentially having Zugaby's daughter here,
yeah,
something in the comments that just I saw, and I just have to say something. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about here, but I just learned it, and it's really cool. Apparently, John Wesley may have secretly been ordained by an Eastern Orthodox priest. So
Boy.
That's a conspiracy theory. We're going to have to chase that one down. But let's get back to our topic at hand. That just blew my mind. That's even a theory out there. It's amazing.
You didn't know that, Dane?
Well, that would mean that I have apostolic succession then.
I thought we talked about that.
We might have. I talk about so many things in one ear out the other, right? But
I see how you take our conversations now.
Yeah.
In one ear and out the other. Well, you're fired.
But that would basically mean that I'm an Eastern Orthodox priest. So, because I'm in the chain of John Wesley. So just do with that what you will.
Are the Methodist bishops Eastern Orthodox bishops too?
Apparently, they might be.
Anyway, all
All
right, sidetracking.
joking aside,
Sorry.
let's get back to our
Yeah,
topic.
yeah.
So let me address the elephant in the room here, because so I think it's important. So the Christian F, I have no idea
There's
if
multiple.
this person is Zugabee's daughter or not.
It's the
Obviously,
claim.
this person knows things, right? And so I'll just bring up they're saying that this miracle, they're denying it. Where are the quotes that I'm looking for? Here it is.
You have it under starred. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So Zugabee was a very religious man who was an expert on the Shroud of Turin. He certainly is. I know his research well. And to use his name in this way is a travesty. So the family of Zugabee emphatically denies this miracle, and they say Zugabee never affirmed this miracle. For example, and their family has found it impossible to stop this story, and the church is just unwilling to end these stories that are completely fabricated. And
the church, yeah.
And
sorry,
yeah, no worries. And she's saying that this miracle has gone viral. There's absolutely no evidence to support it. So that, so this is, and her father died before this all came out. So here's what I will say. So I know I'm in the SSG, so I do have private access, and I know for a fact that the family of Zugabee have indeed come out, like this person is saying, and denying that Zugabee ever affirmed this miracle. On the other hand, I also know and have seen with my own eyeballs that Zugabee did affirm this miracle. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to bring up a primary document written by Zugabee right now. So let me just
I'll go ahead and stop sharing. Yeah.
Okay, I can. You can still share it, and I just removed it. But I'm going to read. Here's the letter from Dr. Zugabee himself in his own words. So there will be no confusion. Are you guys able to see that?
Yeah, I got you, Dale. Go ahead.
Okay, so to whom it may concern, on April 20th, 2004, Michael Wilsey and Ron Tesserio of Australia attended my office in New York and sought my advice on the interpretation of certain materials fixed on a microscope slide. The microscope slide was identified on the label as blah, blah, blah. And at that meeting, I studied the slides under the microscope and rendered my opinion to Mr. Wilsey and them, which they video recorded. And I have the link to the video. You can see it with your own eyes. It's a 34-minute video. Prior to rendering my opinion, I was not given any information on the history of the material. I rendered the following opinion at that time. The slide consists of cardiac heart tissue that displays degenerative changes of the myocardial tissue with loss of striations, nuclear pycnosis, aggregates of mixed inflammatory cells consisting of aggregates of chronic inflammatory cells, which are the predominant cells admixed with smaller numbers of acute inflammatory cells, meaning the white blood cells that little pamphlet that Kevin was showing says, right? So he does talk about white blood cells. The directionality of the myocardial fibers indicates that the site of these changes is relatively close to the valvular region in the ventricular area of the heart. We're almost done. These degenerative changes are consistent with a recent myocardial infarction. What is that? Maybe infraction of a few days duration due to an obstruction of the coronary artery that supplies nutriments and oxygen to an area of heart muscle. The above type changes suggest that the individual had a heart attack a few days prior to death due to obstruction of a coronary artery due to whatever that word is, arteriosclerosis, I don't know, or due to a coronary thrombosis, clot formation within the coronary artery. The latter either caused by the these stupid medical words, the athero process, or to injury to the chest wall, causing injury to the coronary arteries that supply oxygen and nutrients to the heart muscle. The dating of the injury is derived from the finding a predominance of chronic inflammatory cells, degenerative changes of the myocardium with loss of striations, pycnosis of the nuclei, etc. When I was later told that the heart tissue was kept in tap water for about a month and transferred to sterile distilled water for 3 years, I indicated that it would be impossible to see white blood cells or macrophages in the sample. Moreover, it would be impossible to identify the tissue per se, as there would be no morphological characteristics. If you have any further questions regarding this case, please feel free to contact me. With kindest regards, I am Frederick C. Zuggaby, and I think I've got this actual signature in the copy above. So yeah, this is the original copy with his signature. So it is undeniable that at least at one time, Zuggaby, as of 2005, Zuggaby was on board with this. We have to be fair. Now, if the family says he changed his mind later, I don't know. So be it. I'll take the word of the family. But we have to be honest with, that's a primary document that I just showed there. So hopefully that kind of resolves that controversy there. So yeah, back to Kevin and Dane to keep discussing this, or moving on to Tixtla. Okay, cool.
I want to give Dane if he wants to say anything about Buenos Aires to close us out. I'm happy for Dane to close us out on Buenos Aires, but then after that, in the interest of time, I'm ready for Tixtla.
Yeah, cool. I think for the interest of time, we got to move on. But one thing I'll say, to sort of put myself in your shoes, right? I think that the difference between skin tissue and heart tissue is a big deal. So you want consistency when you're doing, a scientific reflection on an alleged miracle. I also think there's something sort of like it's not impossible, obviously, that the same miracle could be repeated 3 times in a row, but I do think it's a little bit strange that Buenos Aires claimed to have 3 miracles in 92, 94, 96, right? Again, not impossible, but typically miracles are, it's like lightning strike, right? It doesn't usually happen in the same place in the exact same way twice. You know what I mean? I could be wrong, but
Holy
so I'm
fire.
just putting myself in the skeptical shoes there. What I will say is on the positive side is that the church is presenting something to Castellan Gomez, to Zuggaby, and that something is something, right? So like whatever they're giving them, they're actually taking it and doing these tests, and we have to keep in mind the priest and the laity and the local church involved, because when we say that Zuggaby has ulterior motives, or Castellan Gomez has ulterior motives, it would be really weird, I think, for a priest to just try 3 times to pull one over on people. Generally, a priest is just trying to do the mass and honor God and love the flock and lead the flock. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that. The actual starting point where there's a priest at a mass and in his hands, all of a sudden he's looking at something that is seeming strange and hard to explain.
Yeah, so there are definitely priests who are not just trying to lead their flock, right?
Well, okay, I understand that, but
yeah, like there are priests who are trying to get famous, like absolutely. Like I think that Father oh shoot, what's his name? The canceled priests guy, Frank Pavone, Father Frank Pavone. I think that he is full of it. And priests are people, right? Like anyone else. Yeah.
Can I just ask a clarifying question before we move on? So do we all agree then that Buenos Aires is fake, for lack of better words?
No.
I don't like the word fake.
Okay.
But I don't think that I don't think that the thing that occurred in Buenos Aires in 92, 94, 96 is actually human heart tissue from a man who lived in the 1st century ancient Near East. I'll say that much. Dane,
what about you?
Well, I mean, I don't think it is necessarily fake. I think that Kevin has shown some parts of the methodology that are questionable and may even highlight serious issues. But, I don't think you can definitively say 100% a hoax or 100% a miracle. I think that we're somewhere in between in terms of what we can definitively say.
Kevin,
A statement with which I agree 100%.
Yeah.
There are some people, when I read the thing from Zugaby, there are a lot of people in the chat that understood an infection apparently is a heart attack. Okay, great. But they're saying that from the report I read, it's referring to an old person, not someone who's 30 years
Right.
old like Jesus. Is that true based on your medical knowledge? Because I just didn't get it. Like, is there any indications that it was an old person versus Jesus?
I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember that, but you can tell the age of a heart from like a histology sample, not to the day. Like they couldn't tell you like, oh, you're 33 and a half versus 33 and 3/4. But a 33-year-old heart looks very different than an 80-year-old's heart. And if there's a heart histology expert telling you that this is like the heart of like an 80-year-old, that seems problematic to me. Again, I don't know. This is actually the first time I'm hearing about that, to be honest.
Yeah. There's just some people. Risto in the chat is saying that it seems like he knows what he's talking about. Like he knew what that word was and stuff.
Interesting. Yeah. CJ is my friend. Yeah.
There you go. So yeah, I will include the report. It will be on my blog. So go to the Real Seekers version of this, and I'll have a link to my blog, and you can read that report, because that, if it is true that this heart tissue is of an old person, well, that would not be consistent with Jesus. I would say that would be very problematic and rule it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Same.
Right. I would agree with that. If it was verifiably, a 50-year-old heart, then that's obviously not Jesus's heart.
So let me just say this real quick, just for our audience sake and then for my sake as well. So if we're not willing to say that this is fake 100% or that it's real 100%, can we at least all agree, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there still needs to be more testing done in this specific case? Would that be something we could all agree on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
No objections here.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for that. I'm finding this conversation fascinating. If you like this conversation, y'all in chat, give us a thumbs up, whether you're watching. We got 3 channels going on here at the same time, technically. So Real Seekers, Faith Unaltered, and Kevin's channel. And so, Kevin, what is the name of your channel so our audience can go subscribe to your channel?
Plain old Kevin Non-Tradicath, just my name. Although
Kevin
that's not my real last name is O'Connor, for the record, but
Okay.
I just don't want to make my family embarrassed of me, so I use a fake last name on YouTube.
Why not Kevin New Order Cath? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Because that's heresy. No,
Second Vatican Council.
What's coming to my mind, guys, is that's 1, 2, 3 channels. Let's go. that's a play on my opening. 1, 2, 3 crowns.
Beautiful.
No one got it, Dane. You're goofy.
You should have gotten it. You've been
I
on
got
3
it.
crowns. Yeah.
I got it. All right. Let's
guys
move
wanna
to Tixtla.
Tixtla? Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it.
All right. So we're moving chronologically in order here, which is very pleasing to me. We started in the 70s with Lanciano. We moved to the 90s for Buenos Aires. Now we are in the aughts. So I know that, like, oddly up here it starts with 2013 when the Archbishop of the Diocese of Tixtla approves it, but then if you scroll down it says October 21st 2006. That's when the Eucharistic miracle occurred. So okay, in 2006 in a town in Mexico called Tixtla, there was another Eucharistic miracle right here. Okay, so first things first, who are the dramatis personae in this one? Well, we already alluded to this, but it's Dr. Castellan Gomez is back. He's the one leading the investigation. Right away, that seems a little weird to me, right? Why do we have the same guy leading the investigation who did the investigation in Buenos Aires?
Can I jump in real quick, Kevin?
Mm-hmm.
Just to clarify something. Is Gomez like appointed from the Vatican or something to go and investigate these? That's why he keeps popping up? Or what's going on here?
He's definitely not appointed by the Vatican. And the
Okay.
reason I say that is because the Vatican actually hasn't approved Tixtla, Mexico.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I did hear that they hadn't approved that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Like, I find it interesting, to say the least, that the same names keep popping up. So I didn't know if this was somebody that was sent out, like, like a chief exorcist would be sent out to do,
Yeah.
multiple exorcisms.
The church is so funny because it
Okay.
gives off this air of like everything that we do is super bureaucratic and nothing is like like unauthorized and stuff. And
Right.
then you actually become Catholic and you realize that it's all a sham. And like you have all of these priests just like doing their own thing without permission from the bishop. You have these lay people calling themselves Catholic, like putting Catholic in the name and like doing investigations and like putting their stuff in like journal articles. And the church has like no idea that they're doing this. Like
Wow.
it's, yeah,
Interesting.
it's much closer to the Wild West than it is to this like highly manicured bureaucratic organization that everyone thinks it is.
Okay.
And you don't realize this until you kind of, well, I was born into it, I guess. Anyway, so we have this event that occurs in Tixtla, and it's being led, this investigation, by Castellan Gomez, who may have just kind of decided like, hey, I'm going to investigate this one himself, right? That's what he may have done. So this is the one where, and I have frankly no idea how they came to this conclusion, but this is supposed to be a graphic that's showing that like it's impossible that the like blood could have been placed on top of the host. So take a look at this. This is the miracle. This one looks a little bit different than the previous ones. It almost looked like somebody took like a red food coloring and kind of like dropped it on top rather than it turning into like a piece of flesh, right? It kind of like the host is bleeding rather than the host turned into flesh. That's kind of what it looks like. Well, according to some unpublished work, this work is not found anywhere, but trust me, bro, it would have been impossible for that to have been dropped from on top. It had to have come out from the inside. And I'm being a little sarcastic when I say source, trust me, bro.
Yeah.
But like this is like this like PDF is like the extent of the scientific work that has made it to the public. I talked about a theme that we're going to be looking at of the science not being very scientific. In a lot of these cases, it's like Dr. Castellan Gomez, approaching other scientists, asking them their opinions, and then publishing it in a like pamphlet like this, and then calling it a day. But then being like, yeah, my scientist friend, like he absolutely totally told me that this is the case. And it's like, well, where's the journal articles? Where's the peer review? It doesn't exist. Look at this with the name dropping. Professor Carlos Parriata of Francisco Marroquin University in Guatemala. Like that's great. But why are we naming professors? Like we should be naming the laboratories. Like the professor does not matter. The lab does. Was it LabCorp? Was it PPD? Was it Q2? Was it Icon? You know, like tell me what lab it is. Was it the university? He doesn't say that this was the University of Francisco Marroquin. He just says it's the professor, which to me is a huge red flag. I think I used the term cult of personality in my intro. And that's what I'm talking about, like the cult of personality, where they're trying to like make you trust these scientists rather than trusting their science, which is, to me, it's always a troubling sign.
Real quick, Kevin, is that what you're talking? So underneath the shroud image there, it says the Gene X Genetics Laboratory in Bolivia performed another study and confirmed that it was human blood of the type AB, just like the one found. Is that what you're talking about? Like, why isn't that over here under this where Professor Carlos is?
I'm much happier with something like that. Like, so
Okay.
when you're listing a lab like that, I am much happier than this professor said this and that professor said
right.
Yeah.
So just to make sure I'm tracking, under the shroud and the laboratory that's mentioned, does that have to do with the Tixtla blood sample, or does that have to do with the shroud? Okay, so that is about the Tixtla blood sample.
I believe it is. Like the wording is super poor here. Like it never mentions like what blood they're testing, but I have to assume that they're talking about because this whole thing is about Tixtla. Like it says Tixtla up the top.
Yeah.
Is the lab there reputable?
I have no idea, but the fact that they're listing the lab to me is good enough. Like I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay, so that would be a little bit better than we had before, maybe.
Yes. Now, what I will say is that I hold absolutely zero confidence in the blood on the shroud being AB. And the reason I do that is because I manage blood samples for a living. Blood chemistry has an ambient stability of, drumroll, 7 days. 7 days. And then if you do your blood chemistry after like on the 8th day, FDA will tell you, sorry, those results are inadmissible. Scientifically, they're not worth anything. So if it was 7 weeks or 7 months or 7 years or 7 centuries, and then you're doing your blood analysis, sorry, my confidence in the blood type that you come up with is really, really low. So
Now,
for that,
one thing that's going to be very different between us, though, would be if this truly is Jesus's blood, then it's fresh and living, by definition, because Christ is life. So there would be a faith component there as well.
well, the blood on the shroud, nobody's pretending like we found whole red blood cells on the shroud.
Okay, well, and I'm not that familiar with the shroud, but in the Eucharistic miracles, well, I should say I'm familiar with the shroud, but not necessarily like every intricate detail. That would be Dale. But with the Eucharistic miracles, I think we're talking about like fresh living blood is at least the claim, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of the claims are like that. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't recall. I could search this document to see if they try to make a claim about the fresh living blood. I also don't know the length of time. It's often several months will go by. Oh, look at this. 2010. That's 4 years.
4 years, yeah.
But like different testing is done at different times. The results arrived after only 2 years. Oh wow, only 2 years. But nothing that I've said it's a little concerning a few times.
Mm-hmm.
The most concerning thing to me is actually down here. And Dane, this is something that you mentioned in your opening. So when there is presence of human DNA, one thinks that also the genetic profile can be automatically obtained. The language here is so weird, by the way. Like, this is clearly not peer-reviewed, the language. But anyway, interestingly, in all the studies performed on the images that sweated blood or in the consecrated hosts that have bled, the presence of DNA was found. But when the work of sequencing to extract the genetic profile was done, they were never able to obtain it.
Right. I did read about that.
And why? Well, the theologians say since Jesus didn't have a father, his father is the Holy Spirit, it's not possible to obtain his genetic profile. Okay.
Oh, well, hey, just that's theologically strange too. His father is the Holy Spirit.
I'm assuming that's like a translation error or something.
Okay,
because his father's clearly not the Holy Spirit.
We would say the father is the father.
Yeah, right.
Catholics
I'm assuming that's
modalist.
no, no. The Catholic Church would not, get behind this little statement right here.
Yeah.
But the point to me that is really concerning is that they're like, oh, no wonder we couldn't analyze the DNA and then compare the DNA between all the samples to make sure that this is really coming from the same person, which would be awesome. But of course we can't do that because Jesus's DNA, he only had half of the human DNA because he only had one parent, right? What's the problem with that? Let's do a Punnett square. Do you guys remember your Punnett squares from high school biology? Okay. So I picked the genes that determine your sex. So do you guys remember Punnett squares? Do you guys remember how this works?
Yep.
Okay. Let's do a normal human Punnett square. X, Y, X, Y. Oh, oops. That's supposed to be an X up there. Sorry. X, 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 Y. So what do you see here? When a normal human mother and a normal human father make babies, there's a 50-50 chance that it's going to be male versus female because 2 of these have XX and that's female. 2 of them are XY because that's male. Mm-hmm. So let's go back and then let's pretend that there is no father. Let's just get rid of these. Okay. So the reason that we can't do genetic profiling is because Jesus doesn't have a dad. So we're going to have an X here. We're going to have an X here from the mother. We're going to have an X here and an X here from the mother. Okay. From the dad. Oh, nothing here. Okay. Nothing here. Okay. Nothing here. Okay. Nothing here. Okay. Great. What gender would Jesus be?
Female.
And would he have a genetic condition called
Very much so.
Called Turner syndrome?
Very
yes,
much
he
so.
would. Turner syndrome is a condition that affects only females. It's the result of when only one of the X chromosomes, when one of the X chromosomes is missing or at least partially missing. So, and you can see from the pictures here that it's a severe genetic defect. Mm-hmm. So when you have the full human genome, you're fully human. Mm-hmm. if you only have half of the human genome,
Mhm.
you're not human anymore. And theologically speaking, that seems problematic to me because Jesus Christ was supposed to be fully God and fully man,
He
not
was
half of a man.
I mean, Hebrews says that he was made like us in every respect and yet without sin.
There you go.
Yep.
So what do you mean you can't extract his DNA because he's only got half of the human DNA?
Yeah.
First of all, that would mean that he has Turner syndrome and that he was female genetically. And secondly, he's not like us in every way. Like he's not actually fully human. He's only half human. Like that just seems problematic to me for a bunch of reasons. And the inclusion of something this blatantly unscientific, like this, 8th grade level biology, like this would not fly in 8th grade level biology.
Are you familiar? I'm sure you are, Kevin, but with Ron Wyatt.
The name's familiar. Who's Ron Wyatt again?
So Ron Wyatt was the guy that reportedly, supposedly, allegedly found the Ark of the Covenant, the Sodom and Gomorrah, Noah's Ark, found the blood, the living blood of Jesus, and he's the one that promoted the idea that Jesus didn't have. How many is it? 46, 47?
23. He said that Jesus only had 23 chromosomes.
20. Yeah, and I'm just like, that goes against everything theologically like the church has ever said, whether you're Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox. So, and I think I'm going to go with the church on that one. But just, that's my bias. Yeah. Not some weird, he's only got half a DNA. Because I think you make a really excellent point that you're right. If that were the case and he got, quote unquote, his humanity from his mother, then he would be female by definition. So
anyway.
Anyway.
I actually agree, Kevin, that putting that in any kind of like scientific work is strange because that's a theological and sort of faith-based question they're dealing with there. However, I think there are other ways to look at it besides just, he'd only have X chromosomes and have Turner syndrome. But that would be me speculating into theology here. But, I think it's possible that God could, supernaturally give him the other part of the genome, the other half, right, to be fully human. But since it's inherited in a different way spiritually and not biologically, it may look different under a microscope or something like that. But regardless, I agree with you, regardless of how we try to talk about that theologically. I agree with you that being included in this paper is strange because it has nothing to do with the science and it's pure speculation and it's theological speculation.
It is. And I think that this is at least partially why the Catholic Church, like the official Catholic Church, has not actually approved Tixtla. I think that if the science was better, they might. But I don't think it was. And, I think for that reason, I think the church has been kind of hesitant to put their weight behind this one.
All right.
Cool. Yeah, that's cool.
I had one more Eucharistic miracle, but in the interest of time, I'm kind of happy to if you wanted to, we could just kind of zoom out, talk about the 3 that we did, take a few questions, and then if you wanted to try to wrap up after that, that might not be a crazy idea. If we did another one, I feel like that's like another hour-long tangent that we could go on.
Yeah. I think it's good timing to sort of wrap up.
Well, just before we do, I just want to show one thing about this blood type AB because it was linked to the shroud. A great paper by an expert in this area, blood expert, who I'm going to be having on my channel in early July, is Dr. Kelly Kears. And he's written an excellent paper that I'll include the link in my blog and on the chat. But it's called The Shroud of Turin, The Relics of Jesus and Eucharistic Miracles, the Significance of Type AB Blood. And he's a shroud agnostic. And he really, in my opinion, he succeeds. He's convinced me that you can't use this argument that the blood type on the shroud or the sudarium or on this front is in fact type AB. So I would say it's an unproven. It hasn't been falsified necessarily. I would maybe disagree with Kevin there, but it's it hasn't been proven in any way. And in some ways, I think it's unprovable. We can never prove what type of blood it is, because of how old. There's a question that all ancient or degraded blood or blood exudates will come back with type AB anyways, so it's irrelevant.
And I'm right there with you, Dale. I don't mean to imply that it cannot be AB. I just mean that the blood, whatever blood would be on the shroud, would be way too old for us to actually determine blood type.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless I cut myself, bled onto the shroud, and then somebody tested that. That would work. But
awesome.
Nothing.
Awesome. All right, cool.
Yeah.
With that said, I think we're in agreement there, and yeah, it was a great show. I think we can kind of wrap up. I'll let each of the guests give a closing word and that sort of thing. But before I do that, Kevin, I would love to. No, I'm not going to take advantage of you. This is the second time I've invited you, but maybe in September or October or something, if you would want to come back, I would want to do a show on the Marian apparitions and how those might compare to the resurrection appearances and stuff.
I would love to.
If I wait, you'd love to. Awesome. So yeah, I'll be in time. I'll give you. Go ahead.
And if Dane is interested in like kind of chatting Marian apparitions with me, I'd be super happy to do that.
Yeah, I would really enjoy that, and I'd really like to talk about the Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe. I think that the story behind that is just so fascinating and so rich, and it would be fun to talk about that.
I have a lot to say about Guadalupe.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
A lot to say.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Guadalupe, and then of course, what's the one? What's the one? Fatima. Yeah, where the son did crazy stuff. Yeah,
I also have a lot to say about Fatima. No, yeah. I like to talk. If you can't tell.
No, it's very fun. So here's what I'll say. I think that with the Eucharistic miracles, it's essentially going to, at this point, be a faith-based claim. Like, do you believe when the church approves it that it's legitimate? Because I don't think that you can. I don't think you can get there through the so-called science that's been presented, right? But so I actually think that the better argument, after talking with you tonight, I think the better argument for the Eucharistic miracles for a Roman Catholic apologist is the church has declared that this is true, and I believe the church. I actually think that's a stronger argument at the end of the day than, hey, we've got Castellan Gomez and Zigabee. I do. I think that it actually carries more weight to just say, look, my church teaches that this is true, and I believe what my church is saying. Now, for some people, the skeptic, obviously that's going to be like, well, that's no evidence at all. The church can say anything. But for the believer, that carries weight. But I will admit that it's questionable that since there's no peer-reviewed paperwork, I think some of the way that things are worded was really strange. The inconsistency around skin cell heart tissue, that's strange. But at the end of the day, I'm not ready to just throw the miracles out with the bad science. I'm still willing to give them a very. I'm still willing to meditate on it and listen to what the church has to say about it. Listen to what Catholic apologists have to say about it, I like to believe, I like to believe that faithful Christians are being honest and not being, deceptive. So I have a very, I try to have a childlike spirit when it comes to these things. So for better or for worse, but it very much interesting, what you've presented, a lot for me to think about. And, it's kind of like the proverb, someone seems right until cross-examined, right? I forget the exact wording of the proverb, but I really appreciate you taking time to do this, and it'll be fun to. Jamie says sometimes people are dumb on accident. I might be one of those people, but
I know I'm one of those people.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily dumb. It's we are all biased, and we'll give more credence or weight to specific voices because we've decided that we want to do that. So anyway, it's not always that we're dumb. It's more that we're biased, I think, in a lot of ways. Some of us are just also dumb. That's also true. Yours truly. But yeah, I'll let you have some final thoughts here too, Kevin. But thank you so much for being here. This was really fun.
And after Kevin gives his thing, we have 2 audience questions, one for each of you. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm gonna keep mine short and sweet. Dane, if your kind of closing remarks were something like, Kevin, thank you for presenting all this new information. You didn't change my mind in the slightest. In fact, everything that I believed before this conversation, I just believe it even more now. But you taught me, like you now I believe another thing that is also true in addition because of this evidence. I would consider that a win, truthfully. Because all that I want to do is put all the evidence out there, and then we could all know that the evidence is what the evidence is and draw our own conclusions. And I kind of don't care what those conclusions are, as like it's about the journey and not the destination in that sense.
Yeah.
And I also just want to thank you for sharpening my iron, right? Speaking of Proverbs, iron sharpens iron.
That's
and and it's through conversations like this that I learn new stuff. I learned new stuff today. I didn't know about that whole Zugabe, the heart being 80 years old thing. I had never heard of that before. So I learned another true thing today. So I benefited from this conversation. And I think that's the most important part. It's never about I don't even care about, like, it's not about debate. It's not, for me, it's not even about changing anybody's mind. It's about presenting evidence to each other, learning new things from each other, and then drawing our own conclusions. But I kind of don't care what the conclusions are. That's really all that I have to say about that. I would be thrilled to do another conversation. We could do, the only one that we left out tonight was Sokolka. If you wanted to do Sokolka at some point, I'm happy to do that. If you want to just kind of skip the whole Eucharistic miracles thing and just go into like Guadalupe and Fatima, we could do a whole show on just those two. But I had a blast. I really liked being here. It was an absolute honor to speak to both of you. And yeah, that's all I've got for closing remarks.
Awesome.
Right
All
on.
right, cool. Yeah, just speaking as the host, I really enjoyed the show between you guys. Always educational listening to both of you. I learn and stuff. I will say I do care about the conclusions too. I think the point is we want to believe as many, as to pull a Matt Dillahunty, believe as many true things as we can and disbelieve as many false things as we can. And
I like
as a
that
team,
quote.
I like that too.
I do.
That's a good one.
Not a huge Dillahunty fan, but I like the quote.
I'll give him that one for sure. So, all right. So let's end off here with just 2 questions. One question for each of you. So the first one is for you, Dane, and this is from John Newby, and he says, or John 20:28. He says, look, the Exodus, the sorcerers did actual miracles. They, just like Moses, they could turn a cane into snakes and stuff like that. So how do we know, even if we granted everything you wanted here in terms of these Eucharistic miracles, how do we know they're from God or versus Satan or demons or some other supernatural power?
Yeah, that's a great question, because he's John 20:28 there is exactly right. The devils and the fallen angels can do counterfeit miracles, and we see that in Scripture. There are some types of miracles that only God can do. For example, raising the dead. We read in Scripture that that Yahweh alone has the power to kill and the power to bring back to life. So there are some miracles that we can know for sure they come from the true God. When it comes to these Eucharistic miracles, and I'm saying that they would be great evidence for the truth claims of the Catholic Church. I would grant the same thing if this was happening in an Orthodox context or in a Protestant context. When the miracles are happening that nourish, deepen, strengthen people's faith that Jesus Christ is the resurrected King, to me, that's a sign that it's from the Holy Spirit, a miracle from the Holy Spirit. The magicians of Pharaoh, they were trying to show that they could match Yahweh, and therefore you don't need Yahweh. You could just go to their gods, right? And so that's what makes those so perverse and wrong, is they're actually leading people away from worshiping the true God. The Eucharistic miracles would be a way of, a sign that, hey, Christ really is king. You really do have fellowship with him here. He really was raised from the dead. And it's my humble opinion that the demons, that's the last thing that they want to reinforce in us, right? They want to make us doubt that, question that, mock that. But if Christ really is who he claimed to be, and if Christians are right that he truly was raised from the dead, which I believe, then a Eucharistic miracle would support that idea. It would reinforce that idea. So that's kind of where I would come from in answering that question. Any miracle that reinforces the idea that Christ is king, that he's alive and well, that he's ruling and reigning, that he's omnipresent, whatever, any miracle that would support that, those claims, would be coming from the side of light, not from the side of darkness. That's just how I would answer that.
Awesome. All right, cool. And Kevin, here's one for you. So I heard something which makes no sense. He said the Eucharistic findings maybe can't be trusted because some reviewers are pro-Rome or pro-Catholic. Where does he get the presupposition that people are pro? Okay, so I guess you can answer that. Where does that come from? But like, even though people are pro-Catholic, I mean, you could just say the same. Like, people have a bias no matter what, if they're pro-atheist or pro-whatever. So, yeah, how do you respond to that biased issue? Like, does that necessarily disprove what they're saying, or?
So it's possible that I've misunderstood the question. But perhaps he's saying, Kevin, are you saying that no Catholic can be unbiased? And certainly not. I think that in a double-blind placebo-controlled study, a Catholic would not be biased. They probably couldn't be biased because they wouldn't know if they're looking at real human heart tissue or if they're looking at Eucharistic human heart tissue. But theoretically, in this kind of double-blind study, you could have Catholics scientists and Muslim scientists and Jewish scientists, and there would be no difference at all because it's placebo-controlled and double-blind. So there's no inherent bias within Catholics. That's not what I'm critiquing when I was talking earlier. What I was critiquing was the lead investigators seeking out of Catholic-friendly scientists. And by Catholic-friendly, I mean people who had either worked on previous Eucharistic miracles, such as Dr. Lanoli, or people who had published books, such as Professor Castellan Gomez himself. Oh, that's something I didn't mention. He published a book about it's called Faith and Science or something like that, and it came out in the year 2000. So it came out after Buenos Aires but before Tixtla, and he was still allowed to lead the Tixtla investigation. I think that's a little, why are we seeking out Catholic authors and pro-Catholic scientists? It doesn't seem like there's any effort at all to do an actual rigorous scientific study. There was no effort to remove bias, and that's what I'm critiquing.
Gotcha. Perfect. All right. Well, that's it. So yeah, thanks again to the guests and thanks to the audience. It was a lively audience today with great points and stuff like that. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to doing a round two on, especially on those Marian apparitions, because I think that's an important critique, right? Especially when they're compared to skeptics will say, oh, the resurrection appearances, they're just something akin to these Marian apparitions. So yeah, let's take a look at that next time.
Let's do it. Can't wait.
Right on, y'all. This was great. Enjoyed it.
This was awesome.
Sounds good. So as Tyler would say, good night, Godspeed, and good night, God bless, and I messed that up. I don't know. But
bye all.
Good night. Good night, God bless, and stay like Christ.
There you go. All right. Thank you, Dane.